Hello, I present the final progress report for the integration of sensory results for the selected family of products.
The purpose of this project is to analyze the impact that different formulations of chocolate spreads have on consumers' preference. This will be done implementing three different sensory tests. The first one is a kata test that has as an objective to evaluate the likable attributes of each brand to suggest possible reformulations if needed due to the seal content. And its hypothesis is that consumers will perceive significant differences in sensory attributes. Specifically, they will perceive the low or high content of sugars, which relates as well to their seal content. The objective of the jar test is to determine the acceptability of the product through the evaluation of different attributes using a structured scale for each to help understand possible reformulations in terms of quantity to eliminate seals. The hypothesis is that consumers will indicate their acceptance of the products, rating the brands with seals with few just about right scores.
The objective of the hedonic test is to evaluate the consumer's preference for each attribute, using a specific scale to rate the participants' liking of each. This to help improve or maintain the likeness in future formulations if intending to reduce the sale content. The hypothesis is that the overall liking of the chocolate spreads will be significantly higher for products that have multiple attributes rated as I extremely like it by the majority of consumers. Also, the products with two seals will have a higher overall liking score because they are more balanced compared to the products with one or three seals.
The participants had to be willing to participate. They had to like chocolate spreads, and we were looking that they usually consume them on their day to day. They had to be willing to follow instructions and do the test as indicated, and they had to be allergen free. This is the sample presentation format for the chocolate spread kata test. There were 6 chocolate spreads per test, and each participant received a teaspoon sized portion of each spread. Each participant was given warm water to cleanse their palate in between samples. And the samples were served directly in the teaspoons, and the spoons were placed on the plate, and the plate had the number identifying the sample. Each sample had a code to eliminate bias. Participants were seated at tables, each with their personal space, and they had the plate, water, and their phone to answer the questionnaire. They each solved the test at their own pace, and no talking was allowed to eliminate bias.
Tested sensory attributes were selected by tasting the products beforehand and through research of similar experiments. Before tasting, participants selected their appearance, spreadability, as if they were hard or easy to spread, fluid or thick, aroma from milk, nuts, or chocolate, and whether it had an oily, smooth, or grainy texture. While tasting, they evaluated tastes like sweetness and its stickiness, nuttiness, milkiness, chocolate, and saltiness. For the acceptability attributes, participants rated the appearance of aroma through a hedonic scale that you can see on screen, and a texture in a just about right scale, also presented above. While tasting, they rated their sweetness, chocolate, and nutty flavor with a jar scale, and their overall liking with a hedonic scale. While the CATA test analyzed the attributes mentioned to differentiate the products, the acceptability test ranked the likings of each mentioned attribute for the spread. The CATA results were transcribed with ones and zeros depending on the selection and analyzed using a principal component analysis on ExcelStat. Hedonic and jar results were transcribed using a 1 to 9 scale and 1 to 5 scale respectively and analyzed with ANOVA for hedonic results and penalty analysis for jar results.
The Cochran's test checks whether an attribute differs across products. A low p-value, like here below 0.05, shows significant differences. Here on this slide, you can see the attributes which are significant different comparing the samples with each other. The symmetric plot for kata data visualizes the relationships between products and attributes. Also, the closer products are to each other, the more similar they are. Thus, the Crimino and the HEB are quite similar to each other. Also, Milka and Nuculato, they're very similar. Both are easy to spread, they're very sweet, and have a strong chocolate aroma. In contrast, Nutella and Evelina are not close to similar to any other chocolate spread. Avellina has a low intensity of sweet and chocolate flavor. Nutella is the most oily chocolate spread and less sticky than the others.
For the jar analysis, we found that HEB and Nutella are more liked in almost every aspect, and you can see that because they have the most color green. We also found that customers did not like the characteristics of Avellina as much as the other spreads. For example, they think that it has very little sweet flavor and a lot of nutty flavor. We think that the similarities in the comparison might have something to do with the composition of the products. The overall liking had no differences for most of the products, even though there were differences in other aspects. As you can see in the overall liking, they liked HEB, Nutella, Nocolato, and Milka the same, but for example, in aroma, there were a lot of differences. Because of these results, we think that there might be other factors that have more impact on the overall liking of the product.
After analyzing the results, it can be concluded that the hypothesis was correct, since consumers were capable of perceiving significant differences between spreads. An observation that also stood out was that the intensity of nutty flavor and the texture of the spreads were attributes that were well defined by consumers.
From the ANOVA and JAR results, Nucolato and HB have maltitol, but one has more than the other and is best perceived. Sensitivity to maltitol should be mentioned on Nucolato, and both Nucolato and Milka should lower their sweetness content with additional ingredients already included in their label, which might eliminate the sugar seal in the case of Milka. Milka has less vegetable oil and low-fat cacao, which grant no fat seals but affect the texture. Cremino and Avellina have lower likeness for texture and sweetness levels, and the trans fat used for thickness and the corn syrup and sugar make Cremino have 3 seals and a sweeter and thicker perception. That should be replaced with the addition of other ingredients as hazelnuts, vegetable oils, or artificial sweeteners.
We concluded that the seals on the spreads didn't guarantee the acceptability from the consumers. HEB and Nocolato were up there on the acceptability and overall liking scale, and they only had between 1 and 2 seals. This means that other factors like flavor, texture, formulation, ingredients, and the aroma were more important factors than the amount of seals that the product contained.